Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. My name is Brandon Steele, and 3 months ago, I thought I had life figured out. I was 28, working as a software engineer in Seattle, making decent money, and dating someone I thought I'd marry. Then everything fell apart in a single conversation. "You're just too much, Brandon," Sarah said, her coffee growing cold between her hands. We sat in our favorite cafe, the one where we'd had our first date 2 years earlier. "You're always working on some project, always reading, always planning something bigger. I feel like I'm dating a robot who's programmed for success, but forgot how to just be." You still here, confused. "But I thought you liked my ambition. You said it was attractive when we first met." She laughed, but it wasn't happy. "I did at first, but living with it, it's exhausting. You wake up at 5 a.m. to work on your app. You read philosophy books for fun. You have a 5-year plan for everything. I just want someone who can watch Netflix without taking notes." 2 weeks later, she moved out. I found myself alone in my apartment, surrounded by business books, half-finished projects, and a growing sense that maybe I was fundamentally broken. Was ambition really a curse? Was wanting to build something meaningful actually pushing people away? That's when I stumbled across a lecture video titled The Napoleon Complex: Why Great Men Walk Alone by Dr. Peter Dinh, a philosophy professor at Stanford University. The title hit me like a punch to the gut. Chapter 2. The Mentor Appears. Dr. Peter Dinh wasn't what I expected. When I finally worked up the courage to email him after watching dozens of his lectures, he invited me to his office in Palo Alto. I expected some old, detached academic. Instead, I met a 50-something man with kind eyes and calloused hands who looked like he'd lived through every lesson he taught. "So, Brandon," he said, leaning back in his chair surrounded by books that looked actually read, not just displayed. "Tell me about your Napoleon moment." "My what?" "The moment you realize that the very qualities that make you capable of greatness are the same ones that make you difficult to love. Every ambitious man has one." I told him about Sarah, about the pattern I was starting to see in my relationships. How women seemed attracted to my drive initially, but eventually grew tired of it. Peter nodded knowingly. In 2019, researchers at the University of Toronto studied over 3,000 couples across the US and Canada. They found something fascinating. Women were initially attracted to ambitious, goal-oriented men, but long-term relationship satisfaction actually decreased when men were too focused on external achievements. "So, I should just give up my dreams?" "God, no." Peter laughed. "That's exactly the wrong lesson. Let me tell you about Napoleon's real mistake, and it wasn't his ambition." Chapter 3. The Napoleon Paradox. Peter pulled out a worn biography of Napoleon Bonaparte. Everyone focuses on Napoleon's famous quote about women, but they miss the deeper truth. Napoleon wasn't rejected because he was great. He was rejected because he never learned how to share his greatness. He opened to a page filled with letters between Napoleon and Josephine. Look at these letters. Desperate, needy, pleading. Here's a man who could command armies but couldn't understand one woman's heart. Why? Because he never learned that greatness without connection is just isolated achievement. Peter showed me a case study from Harvard Business School about tech entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. In 2020, they tracked 200 startup founders through their personal and professional lives. The most successful ones, the ones who built lasting companies and lasting relationships, had one thing in common. They learned to translate their vision into shared experiences. What does that mean? It means instead of disappearing into your cave to build your empire, you bring people along for the journey. Instead of working alone until 2 a.m., you invite your partner to understand why your work matters. Instead of having a vision only you can see, you paint it so clearly that others want to help build it. This hit me hard. I thought about all the nights I'd lock myself away, programming or planning, while Sarah sat alone in the living room. Chapter 4. The Real Problem. Over the following weeks, Peter introduced me to a different way of thinking. We met every Tuesday, and each session peeled back another layer of my assumptions. The problem isn't that women don't want great men, Peter explained during our third meeting. The problem is that most men think greatness means isolation. They think being strong means being self-sufficient. They think having a mission means shutting everyone else out. He showed me research from the Gottman Institute, famous for their relationship studies. Dr. John Gottman studied over 3,000 couples for 30 years. He found that the strongest relationships weren't between equals in terms of achievement. They were between people who turned toward each other, not away. But what about focus? What about discipline? Brandon, look at the most successful leaders throughout history. George Washington had Martha. Franklin Roosevelt had Eleanor. Even Steve Jobs, for all his flaws, had Laureen. The greatest men didn't walk alone. They learned how to walk with others while staying true to their path. Peter assigned me homework. Spend 1 week observing my behavior. When did I shut people out? When did I assume my way was the only way? When did I choose isolation over connection? The results were humbling. Chapter 5. The 4 Pillars of Connected Greatness. After a month of sessions, Peter introduced me to what he called the 4 Pillars of Connected Greatness. Principles he developed studying everyone from ancient philosophers to modern CEOs. Pillar 1. Transparent vision. Great men don't just have visions, Peter explained. They share them in ways others can understand and contribute to. He showed me a case study of Elon Musk. Love him or hate him, Musk doesn't just disappear into his cave. He constantly communicates his vision through tweets, interviews, presentations. He makes people feel part of something bigger. My homework. Instead of working on my app in secret, I needed to share my progress and challenges with the people in my life. Pillar 2. Vulnerable strength. Napoleon's letters to Josephine weren't weak because they showed emotion, Peter said. They were weak because they showed need without offering value. There's a difference between being vulnerable and being needy. He referenced research from Dr. Breen Brown's studies at the University of Houston. Brown found that vulnerability combined with competence creates the strongest form of attraction and respect. It's not about hiding your struggles. It's about owning them while still moving forward. Pillar 3. Inclusive excellence. The greatest leaders don't just achieve excellence, Peter continued. They create environments where others can achieve excellence too. He showed me data from Google's Project Aristotle, which studied hundreds of teams to understand what made them successful. The highest performing teams weren't led by the smartest people. They were led by people who made everyone else smarter. Pillar 4. Balanced devotion. This is where most ambitious men fail, Peter said. They think devotion to their mission means neglecting everything else. But the greatest achievements come from people who can be fully present wherever they are. He referenced a study from a University of Pennsylvania about work-life integration among Fortune 500 CEOs. The most successful leaders weren't the ones who worked the most hours. They were the ones who could completely focus on whatever they were doing in the moment. Chapter 6. Practicing the Pillars. Armed with these principles, I started restructuring my life. It wasn't easy, and I made plenty of mistakes. For transparent vision, I started a blog about my app development journey. Instead of hiding my work, I began sharing my daily challenges and breakthroughs. To my surprise, friends started offering help, ideas, and encouragement. For vulnerable strength, I practiced sharing my struggles without dumping them on others. When I hit a coding problem, instead of sulking alone, I'd say something like, "I'm facing a tough technical challenge that's got me stumped, but I'm excited to figure it out. Want to grab coffee and help me think through it?" For inclusive excellence, I started a weekly meetup for local developers. Instead of just networking for my own benefit, I focused on helping others solve their problems and grow their skills. For balanced devotion, I set strict boundaries. When I was with friends or family, my phone went in another room. When I was working, I worked with complete focus. No more half attention to either. Chapter 7. The Setback. 3 months into this new approach, I thought I had it figured out. I'd started dating again. A marketing manager named Emma who seemed genuinely interested in my work and supportive of my goals. Then I had my first major setback. My app launched and immediately crashed due to server issues. I spent 3 days straight trying to fix it, barely sleeping, stress eating, and snapping at everyone around me. By day 4, Emma looked at me with familiar disappointment. "You're doing it again, aren't you?" she said. "Disappearing into your cave when things get tough." I wanted to defend myself, to explain how important this was, how much pressure I was under. But then I remembered Peter's lessons about vulnerable strength. "You're right," I said. "I am scared." This launch meant everything to me, and watching it fail feels like watching my dreams crumble. I'm handling it badly because I don't know how to handle it at all. Something shifted in Emma's expression. Instead of pulling away, she stepped closer. What can I do to help? Chapter 8, The Breakthrough. That moment with Emma taught me something Peter's lectures couldn't. The difference between isolation and solitude, between independence and self-sufficiency, between strength and stubbornness. I called Peter immediately. "Ah," he said when I described what happened. "You just learned the difference between Napoleon and Augustus Caesar." "What do you mean?" "Napoleon isolated himself when threatened. Augustus built alliances. Napoleon saw help as weakness. Augustus saw it as strategy. Napoleon died alone on an island. Augustus built an empire that lasted centuries." Peter shared a study from Harvard Business School about crisis leadership. Researchers studied 500 business leaders during major setbacks. The ones who recovered strongest weren't the ones who handled everything alone. They were the ones who could accept help while maintaining their vision and authority. Over the following weeks, Emma became not just my girlfriend, but my thought partner. She helped me debug problems from a user perspective. She celebrated small wins with the same enthusiasm I felt. She held space for my frustration without trying to fix it or being overwhelmed by it. Most importantly, she helped me see that sharing my journey didn't diminish my achievement. It multiplied it. Chapter 9, The Integration. 6 months after starting this journey with Peter, I was a different person. My app eventually became successful, but more importantly, my relationships transformed. My parents stopped seeing me as the son who was too busy for family dinners. Instead, I became the son who shared his dreams and included them in his victories. My friends stopped seeing me as the guy who was always working. Instead, they saw me as someone building something meaningful who valued their friendship enough to be present when we spent time together. Emma and I moved in together, but this time it felt like partnership rather than compromise. She had her own ambitious career in marketing, and we learned to support each other's individual growth while building something together. The secret, Peter told me during one of our final sessions, is that greatness isn't about becoming someone others can't relate to. It's about becoming someone who elevates everyone around you while staying true to your own path. He showed me final research from Stanford's Graduate School of Business. They tracked 1,000 high-achieving professionals for 10 years. The ones who maintained strong relationships while achieving their goals had one thing in common. They understood that personal greatness and interpersonal connection aren't opposing forces. They're synergistic. Chapter 10, The New Understanding. Today, I understand what Napoleon missed and what Peter helped me find. The greatest men throughout history weren't great despite their relationships. They were great because of how they approached them. George Washington didn't succeed because he isolated himself. He succeeded because he could inspire others to follow his vision while genuinely caring about their welfare. Winston Churchill didn't lead Britain through World War II alone. He did it by communicating his vision so powerfully that an entire nation adopted it as their own. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't change America by working in isolation. He did it by making his dream become everyone's dream. The difference between Napoleon and these leaders wasn't ambition or capability. It was the understanding that true greatness multiplies when shared. Chapter 11, The Modern Application. Now, when I mentor other ambitious men, something I never expected to do, I share what Peter taught me. The problem isn't that women don't want great men. The problem is that too many men think greatness means becoming someone others can't connect with. I show them research from the University of California, Berkeley's Relationships Lab. In 2021, they studied attraction patterns among 2,000 college-educated women across the US, Canada, and Australia. The most attractive men weren't the most successful or the most ambitious. They were the ones who combined ambition with emotional intelligence, drive with empathy, vision with collaboration. The modern woman doesn't fear greatness. She fears isolation. She doesn't want less from her partner. She wants to be included in the more. Chapter 12, The Ripple Effect. As I write this, 2 years after my breaking point with Sarah, my life looks completely different. My app has grown into a small but successful company. Emma and I are engaged, and she's launching her own marketing consultancy with my full support and partnership. But the biggest change is harder to measure. I'm no longer angry at the world for not understanding my ambition. I no longer see relationships as obstacles to overcome or distractions to manage. I see them as the very foundation that makes meaningful achievement possible. Last month, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop. She looked happy, and I was genuinely glad to see it. We talked for a few minutes, and as we parted, she said something that stuck with me. "You seem different, Brandon. More accessible, like you're still you, but a version of you that has room for other people." She was right. I'm still ambitious. I still wake up early, still read philosophy, still have 5-year plans. But now I understand that the fire within me burns brighter when it warms others, not when it isolates me in my own private heat. Epilogue, the choice. Peter once told me that every ambitious man faces a choice. He could be Napoleon, brilliant, but ultimately alone, or he could be something greater, a leader who lifts others while climbing himself. The difference isn't in the destination. It's in who walks beside you when you get there. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my story, know this. You don't have to choose between greatness and love, between ambition and connection, between your mission and your relationships. You just have to learn to build bridges instead of walls, to share your light instead of hoarding it, to understand that the greatest men in history weren't remembered for what they achieved alone, but for how they inspired others to achieve alongside them. The fire within you is meant to kindle other fires, not to burn alone in the darkness. That's the real lesson Napoleon never learned. And it's the lesson that changed everything for me. The greatest men don't walk alone by choice. They walk alongside others by design.